Hey, and welcome back. It's the Scaling Secrets podcast. Juliana Strickland is here from spacecamporganizing.com, and she is a person who has a company called Space Camp. She's been featured in the New York Times. She's formed an exciting video partnership with the Container Store, and she has a vision of helping people live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives at home. And especially Space Camp Organizing wants to make the world a better place to live, one room at a time. So we're going to be finding out all about the secrets that have come up and how to scale and how to overcome everything. So forgive me right off the bat here. Is it Juliana or Juliana? I want to make
It
sure.
is Juliana, but I'm terrible at correcting people. A ton of people at my wedding actually came up to me and were like, "You never told me it was Juliana." So you can call me either one.
Well, it's a life lesson in many ways, right? Stand up for yourself,
hmm
but also pick your battles because sometimes it doesn't really
hmm
matter that much. And so we kicked it off a little bit, introduced you, but in your own words, what are you focused and passionate about? What do you think we need to pay attention to as far as what you've accomplished and what you're doing?
Absolutely. So I own a home organizing company, as you said, and something that I feel very passionate about is I think that our surroundings and our homes really affect our emotional state, our well-being, and it affects our daily lives and how successful we are and other things, how successful our relationships are, how much we're enjoying things. So I'm here to help people really fall in love with their homes again. And it's amazing how your life will transform when your home works for you. So that's what I really am passionate about.
Wonderful. And you're not kidding. Any of us who've experienced just even just rearranging the home a little bit, or even like I've been in the same house for 16 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
for a few years, I was like, maybe it is time to move and like close to paying off the house. And should I start over somewhere else? And my wife painted one wall in the kitchen and
hmm
it just like
hmm
changed everything. And it put us both in such a better mood,
hmm
motivated us to do more. So I can definitely relate to just changing things up, re-examining, and like when people like style their clothes, it's like styling your environment and saying like, hey, I'm actually putting some thought into my surroundings instead of just the clutter that's accumulated. Or when I moved in, I put that table there and that's just been that way for so
It's
long,
been
and
there
then
forever. Yeah.
yeah, and then
You
you
get a
you
little bit of
fall into that.
blindness.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Until one day you're like, I am recognizing that I'm unhappy, or it's usually the clients that come to us, they're recognizing that functionally something's not working. So maybe they're late taking their kids to school one too many times, and they're like, okay, the reason we're late is because we can never find all the backpacks and get all the things together to get out of the house on time. So how can I fix that? And that's when people call us because they're like, I'm having a problem, and then we'll come in, help them solve that specific problem, but then it usually domino effects into doing most or all of the house, because then it's like, well, actually, now that we've fixed this, now we have a problem of always letting food go bad because we don't know what we have and we're wasting a ton of money on that. Like, great, well, let's organize your pantry so you can see what you have, you enjoy cooking, you aren't wasting too much money shopping. And then they're like, oh gosh, now could we do our closet, because I hate getting ready in the morning and I think I have things in here that fit me like 5 sizes ago. And it's really just a domino effect, but it also is an incredible building block to being intentional about your life, really thinking through what you have, taking the time to surround yourself with systems and with beauty. And there's really just no downside to doing it.
Wonderful. Taking the control back, being proactive.
hmm
And
Absolutely.
we all know people like you who you go to their house or their workplace and things are color coded and it's beautiful and it's amazing. But as far as someone making this change, is it fair or safe to say that maybe people are afraid of breaking out of that middle zone? Like they know they're unhappy, but then they're maybe like afraid of like doing anything differently. Like there's maybe the resistance to change.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. There's a lot of resistance to change, especially when it comes to organizing, because there's a lot of shame around being disorganized. And there's a lot of shame around spending money on things that you realize later that you didn't need or didn't actually want. And then you feel guilty getting rid of them, but you don't want them. It's like this whole anxiety spiral that is, I would say, more people have it than don't have it. And so then you're just sort of locked in this stasis, and it's really hard to break free of it. But once people sort of understand that things that you've bought in the past are a sunk cost, like from an economic standpoint, right? Like you can't get that money back. Maybe you can return something if you just bought it recently. Maybe you can sell it and make a portion of what you spent on it back, but you're never fully getting that money back. And so dwelling on it and feeling guilty about it and holding on to it just because you bought it in the past isn't actually serving your present self or your future self. So once you can kind of like break that and like change that sort of neural pathway firing in your head, then it's just you're off to the races because you're like, oh my gosh, it's so clear to me that I don't need this. I do need this. I don't need this. I really want this. Like you can just start making decisions. And it not only impacts your home and your relationships, but it impacts everything else in your life because you're learning then to get past the fear of making decisions. You're choosing a way to go, right? And I feel like that's always, as we get into talking about scaling and business and all of that kind of stuff, I feel like sometimes you don't know necessarily the right decision to make, but you have to make a decision. And by choosing to make the next decision and then choosing to make the next decision after that, you will eventually find your path. But choosing to make no decisions is still choosing something. It's just not a way forward. So we try to help clients really break free of that guilt and that shame and that indecision and move forward. And they're always happier for it.
That's helpful to think about, if not maybe somewhat painful, right? The
Mhm.
psychology of the sunk costness of it. And
Yeah.
but I like your problem solving here, that that at this point, uh, making no decision or choosing not to change, that's a decision, but it
Yeah.
might serve us to start small and just say, hey, I'll change up this one room, or I'll do the garage sale and get rid of the treadmill that's become a clothes holder, whatever it is, and then you feel so much better, and then that
Mhm.
kind of busts you out of it. It leads you to make better and better decisions. And so is everyone different, or when you go to one of these clients, is there a logical starting point? Is it like the kitchen? Like where do people start as far as busting out of the cycle?
So I would say that there are similarities in every job, but every client is different. So I would say the number one best advice is to start where you are going to get the biggest relief first, if that makes sense. So it's like if there's a spot in your home that every time you see it, it just drives you absolutely crazy. It's like an itch you can't scratch. Start there, right? Because that's where you're most motivated to do it. And that's just what logically makes sense. And once you do that, you're going to get the biggest relief. You're going to get a dopamine hit, right? You're going to get all these endorphins from clearing out space, from ticking something off of your to-do list, and then you're going to be more motivated to keep going in different spaces. And actually what you said earlier really spoke to me, like doing one room, one space. Sometimes I even like to make it smaller. Like if we're doing a client's home, yes, we'll start with one room or one space. But if someone's organizing for themselves and they feel stuck, sometimes I'm like, literally just do one drawer. Or if you have a purse or a backpack, just clean that out. Like literally spend 5-10 minutes because it's just like it's the same as starting an exercise routine, right? And they're like, just put your running shoes on and go for a walk and see what happens. So if you set out to be like, I'm going to organize my whole house, you're probably going to fail because it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And a lot of people like tear a whole room apart and then they realize that the day is over and they're exhausted and they're like, oh God, what do I do now? I have to put this all back. That's why I'm always like, start small, get a little taste of what it feels like to live a little bit more organized. And then it'll be so much easier to keep the momentum going from there.
Very nice. And that's just great productivity advice in general, right? Just that if
Totally.
I have a task that of any kind, whether it's exercise or it's like, oh, I have to like edit this document or something, it's like if it's following me for weeks or months, I'm like, hey, let me just do like the smallest, tiniest little thing, put even like two
Mm-hmm.
minutes into this, and then I end up
Mm-hmm.
putting more time than I planned, and then it becomes just the building of a nice habit. And so how did this become a business for you? Was there like an origin point, or how do you go from being this person with like this great skill to making money from it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And kind of the amazing thing about this is it happened 100% naturally. So I went to film school at USC. I was working as a producer and a host in digital media, and what the way that worked is I would get a show for a little bit, I'd work for a couple months, and then I would need to make money in between. And so I was working as an assistant and a babysitter and doing all these different things for, different people in Los Angeles. And it sort of turned into organizing because one person's like, "Can you help me move?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And it turned out I was really good at organizing all the different parts of that. Like, so much of organizing is executive function. So knowing what to do in what order so you are the most productive, it makes the most sense financially, spatially, time-wise, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm really good at that naturally. And so then I was like, well, you know what? If I'm helping you move and I'm overseeing the movers, why don't I just unpack your kitchen and put it away for you? Or why don't I, figure out how, let's get you some shelves in your garage and get you some bins and put everything away so it's nice. So we're not just like leaving it around. And then one person told another, and then they told another, and then they told another. And before I knew it, I was booked. It took a couple of years, but I was booked pretty much nonstop. And I was like, oh my God, I was getting bigger and bigger jobs. I was like, I need to bring someone with me to do this. Otherwise, it's going to take me weeks of me alone in this house to get it organized. So that's how I got my first employee. I hired a friend to help me. And then actual organizers started reaching out because I would post pictures just on my personal Instagram. And I got my first organizing employee. And then after a couple years of having a few more people just reaching out to me, being like, hey, can I come work with you? Can we try it together? And I think I'm a really good boss and I'm a good collaborator. So we just had fun together. And eventually I was like, I guess I should name this thing because it's like a real business and we've been working for years. And yeah, it's just been so natural. And still to this day, most of our clients come from word of mouth, which is how I like it.
And why is it called Space Camp, by the way?
When I wanted to name it so it wouldn't just be, my goal was going back. I really wanted to have a kid, which now I have. I have a 9-month-old baby boy, but I was like, if I want to have a kid someday, it can't just be Juliana the organizer, Juliana Strickland, my friend who organizes, because everyone will expect me to be there all the time. And I really want to train other people to organize in my style with my methodology and sort of oversee the whole thing so then I can have a baby and I can be a little bit more flexible. So I was like, well, I have to have a name outside of my own name so that people will trust the company and not be nervous if the owner isn't there. So I was trying to come up with a name, and so many of the good names were already taken. And I was looking at all the different URLs that were available and all the different things. And I was like, I want it to not be cheesy. I want it to feel kind of like cool and funny. And I was in the bath where all the greatest ideas of my life come. And all of a sudden Space Camp came to me and it felt like just sort of like a fun, cheeky, cool thing that it's like, yeah, we're not like normal organizers, we're fun organizers. And it sort of is like taking your space to camp. Like it's fun and it feels a little nostalgic because I think everyone has so people stop me all the time if I'm wearing my space camp gear and they're like, can I tell you about how when I went to space camp when I was a kid? And I was like, sure, tell me. So yeah, I don't know, it just felt right. One of those moments where something just sort of comes to you and you're like, that's it. So, and it has served us well. And the clients who think it's fun and funny, they tend to be ideal clients for us. And so it sort of attracts the right people as well.
Awesome. And we've all been there, right? We had an aha moment about the name, and it's like names of companies are so weird, aren't they? You think about like what
Yeah.
a Google or a Yahoo or a Tesla, what does it even mean? But then it
Hmm.
evokes certain emotional triggers, whether you're looking for like fun, nostalgic, whimsical, things like that. And so
Hmm.
it's just a cool little insight. And so because this is a scaling secrets podcast, my
Hmm.
ears perked up a little bit when you talk about some of these things like bringing an employee along early
Hmm.
and things like, well, you have your own kind of methodology that's yours, it's your system, but then also doesn't require you. So you can also kind of go off and live your life. And so kind of tell us about the scaling aspect of thing. Like, what do you think that you've done well as far as the
Hmm.
scaling, systematizing that maybe makes you stand out compared to other business owners?
Absolutely. A few things. I think number one, it has been slow growth. And, I organized, I sort of created my own style of organizing because I didn't learn from anyone else. I didn't learn from any books. I literally just would do it for one person and make decisions based on common sense and what felt intuitively right for me. And sometimes I would make the wrong decision and sometimes I'd make the right decision. And I learned from that. And it was years of doing that. And then years of working with team members and working with them and sort of gently critiquing them on the jobs and learning from them as well and learning to collaborate, that my personal style kind of developed. And then when I decided to name the company, I was like, also, I hired someone to do the branding and to build a website for me. I sat down with one of my employees at the time, who is also one of my closest friends now. She ended up moving across the country, or to move to London. But she and I sat down and really hashed out like the company values and wrote out from start to finish how we organize, how I organize, how I expect, a team handbook, how I expect everyone to behave at jobs, from what they wear, from how they talk to clients, from what time they arrive. Like, you don't get there too early, but you don't get there late. Like, all these really minute, small things that might seem inconsequential, but at the end of the day come together to build brand identity and client trust. And so I have all of it written down, and then from there, I have done a lot of hands-on teaching with team members, and I personally meet at, like, I still do all the interviewing if we have new people, and I try to have some one-on-one time with them. And I also built an organizing course I think we started it in 2020, and that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, I put thousands and thousands of hours into this thing and made 7 video lessons, and it teaches you how to think how I think. And I have all new hires take that, and they have to work their way through it, sometimes multiple times, and do several spaces in their own home, and they get paid to do it. And that has really just like solidified the high quality, just, what I expect of my team members. And I think all of those things have come to be really successful. And I think we have more consistency than other organizer companies that I have had the chance to kind of peek into. I mean, there's lots of people doing beautiful organizing work, so there's space in the industry for all of us. But I tend to be very impressed with my team and their professionalism, and I think that's because, like, we've done the work, right? We've really built the house from the ground up, and we built a foundation, and we've been slowly working our way towards this goal of me being a little bit more hands off. But that wasn't something that happened overnight. It took many, many, many years.
Very cool. And that does seem like quite the trek, right? Quite the
Yeah.
process, like turning the analog into the digital. I'm not sure how well to describe it, but like, you have your kind of raw talent, intuition, common sense, the way that you just do it and you just go. You see it and you know what to do. But then, as you said, it's sometimes you make mistakes and it's not always as consistent as your brain wants you to think it is. And then you
Yeah.
have to go through this like frustration of like hitting the bounds and like documenting things and saying like, well, here's how it's done, and maybe iterating through all that. And I mean, I don't know about you, but like, I've butted heads so many times with someone who says like, oh, well, I can do it. I can just use the software, click this button. I'm like, write it down, make the checklist so that
Mm-hmm.
way, if you handed it off to someone, they could do it. Oh, only I could do it. But it's like,
It's
trust
just
me, like,
not true. Yeah,
yeah.
it's I have a really wonderful business coach I've worked with, that's something that I will tell anyone and everyone who wants to start a business. Like, have a therapist, get a coach, have a mentor, like, get as much information as you can from other people, and come into it with a really humble attitude. Because I realize that I still make mistakes, and we still butt up against problems that I'm like, oh, and that's never happened before, but let's solve it right now. And it was years and years ago when I was talking to my coach, and I was so frustrated because I was overworked and exhausted and like burning the candle at both ends. And I was like, there's just no way to teach someone what I do. Like, what I do is really special or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I said that exactly, but she was like, okay, yeah, what you do is special, but like, it's not so special that you can't teach someone else to do it. Like, be more creative than that. And also, like, get off of your high horse. Cause like, if you really think only you can do it, then only you will be doing it for the rest of your life. And if that's what you want, great. But if it's not what you want, then you need to figure out some way to systemize it and allow others to learn how to do it. And in a lot of ways, a lot of my organizers have surpassed my skills in many of the different areas that we organize in, right? Like they're better at folding than I am. They're better at like labeling quickly. They're better at sorting quickly. Like sometimes they're better at the lead calls. They're better at talking to clients of certain types. And I think it's just about being kind of like having humility and saying like, okay, this business comes above my ego. It becomes before my ego, and I don't have to be the best at everything. And in a lot of ways, I'm much happier and I'm much more balanced because of that. And I definitely give a lot of credit to my coach and to my therapist for helping me get there as well, because I think a lot of people never get past that hurdle. And I had a job years and years and years ago where I was working at an art gallery, and the people who owned it had been running it for like 25, 30 years. And they were near the end of their tenure. They were really sick of it, but they had never given up enough autonomy to any of their employees. So I was bored as an employee, and I kept coming to them with all these ideas. And they were just like, it'll never work. We don't want to do it. But they were so over it that they burnt out and ended up closing it. And I'm like, that's, I think, the trajectory of most small businesses in the United States, especially because just like there's this idea of being an individual and like doing things on your own, and you have to be the best at it and no one else can do it. And if you don't find people to help you, then like you're eventually going to burn out and need to stop doing it. And so if you want something to have longevity beyond you, you have to find ways to teach people to do what you do.
100%. Don't build yourself a job, right? Don't be the bottleneck because you're self-sabotaging and you'll burn out. And so these are
Totally.
some great insights and ahas, and that's a huge problem that you've had to solve. And as you said, a lot of business owners, they deep down don't want to solve it, don't know they can solve it, don't have that therapist, so then they end up like getting in their own way. And so that's a huge hurdle to have overcome. And as far as this subject of solving problems and overcoming, is there
Hmm.
another like huge problem, huge like transformation that you've had to go through in this journey of growing your business?
Oh God, so many. Let me try to think of a good example. I mean, there's been so many problems. I mean, I guess we can talk about, let's talk about the pandemic, right? So, with all the supply chain issues, when we were organizing, we went back into homes in, I think it was like June or July of 2020 with masks and all that kind of stuff, and different protocol and a contract addendum, all of that kind of stuff. But we couldn't get products. And we were organizing homes, and it used to be that you could just go to Container Store or Target or IKEA and just grab what you needed and use it and be done with it. We had to totally change our system of how we organized, because we couldn't just know that, oh yeah, we need 10 bins that are 10 by 10 inches and we can just go get them anywhere. So we were starting to have to order things ahead of time. We'd have to really think about what we were going to need. We ended up getting an office space and filling the shelves with all this different product that we were holding on to. And we then had the competitive edge because so many organizers couldn't get anything, but we had great stuff because we were holding on to it and we were paying to hold on to it. Um, but then I think the big lesson is just learning to pivot all the time. So then we moved to an even bigger warehouse where we were stocking tons and tons of stuff, and it financially just didn't pan out for us. Like we weren't making enough money wholesaling anything. We ended up, because we could get things easier again once the supply chain issues resolved themselves a few years later, we ended up just buying very specific things for clients. And then the stuff that we were stocking at the office was just sitting there gathering dust, and we were paying a ton of money to store it. So then we decided to get rid of that storage space. And now we just store a tiny bit of stuff in a storage unit. We've gotten rid of that overhead cost and we are doing things differently. So it's like continuing to pivot when you identify. I think that's a big part of our success is as soon as we identify a problem, we're like, okay, great. Is this a real problem or is this just a bump in the road? And once we realize, okay, it's actually not working, what can we do differently? Let's brainstorm a few different ways to try something different and see if it works a little bit better. So our process of what we do for product has significantly transformed over the last 4 years, but it came from a problem. Like the pandemic hadn't happened and the supply chain issues hadn't happened, I probably would be doing things the exact same way I did them 5 years ago. And ultimately, the way we do it now is so much more efficient, so much more communicative with our clients. It tells them up front how much we're going to be spending in product. We arrive with a ton of product on our job so we can shop from what we have. We have a runner who goes around Los Angeles picking things up as we need them. Like, our process is so much more advanced and sophisticated because we had to solve a problem.
Amazing. And I'm right there with you where I'm grateful for the pandemic as well. Like, I mean, pandemic revolutionized the video chatting and the Zooming and exactly what we're doing right here. I think it went from like 2 employees to 9. And
Oh,
I
wow.
love this pivoting concept of saying like, okay, well, we're going to have this kind of continuous awareness of like what problems are in front of us as a company, and then what are the size of the problems? Is it like a showstopper, bump in the road?
Mm-hmm.
How dangerous is it, and then also like what are a few possible paths to figure it out. And in the end, problems are good, right? Problems kind of keep you on your toes and you end up figuring out a better way because there's always something to be done. Like, there's only so many hours in a day. You have a
Mm-hmm.
little kid, you know that exactly. But then if we're not just going to tinker for no reason, right? So the problems kind of
Yes.
force us to change in that way.
You're exactly right. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves that I see other, not pet peeves necessarily, but sometimes new organizers will ask if I'll talk to them on the phone and give them advice, and they can pick my brain and ask me some questions about things. And often their first question is like, well, how do you advertise? And I'm like, well, do you know how to organize? And they're like, well, I mean, I'll get to that, but I need to figure out how to advertise first. And I was like, that's so backwards to me. And it's the same idea as like tinkering when there's no problem. Like, let there be no problem if there's no problem. Like, just kind of like let it flow. And, if you're a new organizer, go organize for people, find clients naturally. And then if you're not getting enough clients, but you feel like you have a great product, then you can think about advertising. But until you reach that problem of needing to reach more clients, there's no point in advertising. So it's just about like not creating problems where there's not any, but then being ready and saving your energy a little bit so that when a problem does arise, you can snap to it, you can be creative, you can really work hard to solve it as quickly as possible so there's as little fallout as possible.
Yeah, I mean, have some proper focus, right? And don't just advertise because you hear that's what you should do. Do it because if your problem is, I don't have enough clients and that's the missing piece, then problem and then go to that solution. And that's a kind of great to think about it in that way. And so
Hmm.
as we're nearing the end of our conversation, I wanted to make sure that we cover the bases
Yeah.
and that I ask you the right questions. But we've only just met, so I don't know exactly the right questions. So is there a question that you'd wish I would ask you? And can you ask it for me and just pretend I asked it?
Ooh, that's fun. um I think that the question should be, sorry, you put me on the spot, is how what sorry, I essentially want to talk about running a team and like my what I've learned about being a boss and running a team. I don't know what the question is, but I feel like I have learned a lot from that, and I'm trying to think what the question should be. Like, what's my best advice for having a team and running it effectively and like good team retention? Is that a good question? I don't know.
I think it's a great question.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. You can tell I'm not an interviewer here. I don't have good questions, um, but I do feel like, you know, the number one most valuable thing you have as a business owner, besides your product and your client base, is your team. And you need to know you can trust them. You need to believe in them. And I think what I have, I think I lucked into it. Honestly, I luckily am good at intuitively seeing like what people are good at and what they're not good at, and trying to lean into pairing the different people on my team with tasks that they are good at. And then if we find that they're not good at something, having a conversation about it. But then also, not everyone has to be good at everything. And so, like, figuring out who's the bottleneck where, and like getting those, it's almost like organizing a space, but with people and with a company. And so, really just putting people in a position where they thrive. I think so many people have jobs where they're not good at parts of them, but they think like, well, this is just my job and like it is what it is and I'm going to struggle here. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be like that. Like we all have to do things that we don't want to do sometimes, but for the most part, I know the strengths and weaknesses of my team. And if someone is much better at working with their hands and not as good at computer work, I'm not going to just have her do spreadsheets all day. I'm going to make sure she really gets to work on things where she's styling shelves, where she is designing things, where she is going and shopping in person to pick things out. She's going to come up with such incredible ideas that I never would have come up with by letting her lean into what she's naturally good at. Same with other people on my team. Like I'm terrible at making spreadsheets. So I have other people on my team that are good at it. And I'll be like, hey, if you have an hour today, can you do this for me? Because you're going to be able to do it faster and more efficiently and more effectively than I will. So it's, and what I've then tried to lean into is letting, encouraging people to be honest about their strengths and their weaknesses. Because you don't need to pretend that you're good at everything because not everyone's good at everything. And I try to lead by example there. And I really own my strengths and I really own my weaknesses. And I encourage everyone on my team to do the same. And because of that, we've all been together for many years and we have really good communication. And I think that's why we're able to tackle problems easily and we have a lot of employee satisfaction. And so I'm constantly learning. It's not done, but I think that something that that our clients ask all the time is like, how did you find your team? Like, how did they come to be so great? And I was like, we've all grown together because we have a really good sense of communication and honesty about things. And I'm really proud of that.
Amazing. So communicate, know what your strengths and weaknesses are, know if something's not working and put
Hmm.
this person over there, figure out the right fit. And like you think about this word organization, right? It applies in
Hmm.
all these ways, like a company organization or like the organs in your body, right? It's like your heart and your lungs, they perform different tasks separately, but they also
Yes.
work together. And so it's cool just
Yes.
to think about just this idea of so many of our problems, if we have like a money problem or a time problem, it's like things are just the resources are there. They just have to be kind of applied in different order, different space. And so it's really cool to get a feel of your energy. And that's what I'm always looking for, right? If someone's like really good at something, like if you're good at organizing, I'm like, hey, I'm always looking to be better at organizing. Like, how can I
Hmm.
tap into her mindset and thought process? And it's great for us to, as we're scaling a company or an organization, just to hear some of these tips and insights from you about what you've accomplished. And so, what are some next steps here? If someone wants to find out about Space Camp organizing, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, like you do this, but you teach this as well, right?
Absolutely. Yes. So they can go to our website, spacecamporganizing.com. If you live in Los Angeles, we do in person, in home, and in office organizing for people. If you don't live in Los Angeles, we have an online course that everyone can take, and it is to teach you to learn how to organize for yourself. Sort of like, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. That was the thought process behind it. So if you're kind of a go getter and you want to try that out, we have that course. You can also find us on Instagram. Our handle is Make Better Space. And it's the same along all of our platforms. So TikTok, Pinterest, Make Better Space on all of those. And we are always posting all kinds of informational and teachable content. I think teaching is it's something that I'm leaning more into now that I am not needed as a point person on my team day to day. And now that my time is split taking care of my child, I've learned that my passion is really teaching people and helping them learn how to help themselves be organized and enjoy their homes more. So I run our socials because I love it. And so I'm always making reels, teachable content. People ask me questions all the time, and I love answering them. So you can find me there too.
Very nice. Make
Yeah.
better space on those socials, and you're
Hmm.
really doing what we all want to do is like the e-myth of itness of it of like saying like, well, at first I work in the business and I do these things, but
Hmm.
as it grows and becomes its own beast, then I transition to the learning and saying like, hey, here's how it can be done. And as you said earlier, that's how it helped you grow, right? By just
Hmm.
kind of broadcasting what you've been doing and putting on social media. And that's so important, right? We can't just do the work and then not and expect people to just find us. That's sort of like performing just a separate job. We
Mhm.
want to grow a business and have a purpose and a mission and share all that with the world. And so that's what you're doing. Make better space and spacecamporganizing.com. And you said a few minutes ago that I put you on the spot. And so if it's okay with you, it's time to put you on the spot one last time,
Okay.
because near the end, I like to ask people about a fun quote or lesson that has helped them that maybe can help us. So does anything come to mind, putting you on the spot a
Yeah.
second time, quote or lesson, what do you have?
Yes. Okay. I actually know exactly what I want to say. I don't remember who the author is, so I apologize for that. But it was in a Substack article I was reading recently. It is a woman who's a poet who's going through cancer treatments. And she used the quote, or she said, all news is good news. And she was talking about how she was having a cancer treatment, and like a vision of her grandmother came to her and told her this. And it was like, don't be worried, just kind of like keep walking through. And as as you know, my business is one of my babies, right? It feels very personal to me. And when things don't go right, or when we ended up deciding to close our big warehouse that we had, those were painful moments. But I really do believe that all news is good news ultimately and eventually. And like we said earlier, like problems are there to teach you, and you don't have an opportunity to grow unless you have to solve problems. And so I try to take any sort of changes that come and any sort of problems that come as sort of evenly as possible, and remember that all news is good news. And ultimately the lessons that are coming to me are ones that I need to learn, and it's going to make me a better leader and a better person and a better friend and a better, I mean, the work that we're doing in people's houses is healing for people, and it's important for the world. I truly believe that. I know that's like a little crazy to say, but I really truly believe that. And so yeah, every obstacle is an opportunity to do better.
Amazing. And I believe that as well, right? We spend so much time in our space and we owe it to ourselves to take the control back of it and make sure that it's the best and make us feel good. And it's really easy for it to not be that if we don't even know that it could be better. And, there's that saying, if you're going through hell, keep going. But I like
Yep.
yours
Mm-hmm.
and the Substack version better, which is all news is good news. So spacecamporganizing.com. And then what was that social handle again?
Oh, make better space.
Make better space. So go
Mm-hmm.
there right now and
Mm-hmm.
subscribe to those on Instagram or your social platform of choice. Make better space, spacecamporganizing.com. Juliana Strickland, wonderful speaking with you and just getting an awareness, a handle on this life-changing idea of improving our space. I love it and I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. This has been so much fun. And if you ever need help with your space, you know where to come. I'd love to help you.
All right, super.